I never thought putting up Christmas lights would turn me into the neighborhood's most wanted rebel. But here I was, standing in my front yard at 7 in the morning with Karen Daniels from the HOA pointing a manicured finger at my roof, like I had committed some heinous crime. "Mr. Norton, those lights are completely unacceptable," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the crisp December air in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that all exterior holiday decorations must be traditional red and green, and yours are. She paused, her face scrunching up like she had tasted something bitter, blue and white. I took a sip of my coffee and looked up at my house. Yeah, the lights were blue and white. They reminded me of winter, of snowflakes and icicles, and honestly, I thought they looked pretty damn good against the red brick of my 2-story colonial. I had spent 3 weekends getting them just right, climbing up and down that ladder until my legs felt like jelly. "Karen, I read through the entire bylaws document before I moved here 2 years ago," I said, keeping my voice level. "There is nothing specific about Christmas light colors. It just says decorations should be tasteful and not create excessive light pollution or noise." Her perfectly styled blonde bob did not move an inch in the wind as she shook her head. "The spirit of the rule is clear, Yates. Traditional means traditional. Red and green. That is how Christmas has always been celebrated in Willow Creek Estates, and that is how it will continue to be celebrated." I was about to respond when my neighbor, Tom Richardson, came out of his house across the street. He gave me a sympathetic wave. Tom was a good guy, a retired firefighter who had lived in this neighborhood for over 15 years. If anyone knew the real HOA rules, it would be him. "Morning, Karen," Tom called out. "Those lights bothering you?" "They are not in compliance," Karen said, turning her attention to Tom like she was recruiting an ally. "I am sure you agree that we need to maintain standards in our community." Tom walked across the street, his hands in his jacket pockets. "Actually, Karen, I think they look nice. Different. My grandkids are coming next week, and I bet they would love them." Karen's face flushed red. "The rules are the rules, Tom. We cannot just have people doing whatever they want. Next thing you know, someone will put up inflatable decorations or those tacky projector lights." "The rules say tasteful," I interjected. "These are tasteful. They are LED lights, energy efficient, and they are not even that bright. Mrs. Henderson 3 houses down has those giant inflatable snowmen that are taller than her garage, and I have not heard you complain about those." "Those are traditional," Karen huffed. "Snowmen are traditional, and blue and white are not Christmas colors," I asked. "Pretty sure the song goes, 'I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, not a red and green one.'" Tom chuckled, and I could see Karen's jaw tighten. She pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. "I am documenting this violation. You have 48 hours to replace those lights with appropriate colors, or you will be fined $250. "You cannot fine me for something that is not actually in the bylaws," I said, my frustration growing. "I will be happy to go to the HOA board meeting and discuss this." "I am the HOA president," Karen said, her voice dripping with authority. "And I am telling you right now, those lights need to come down. 48 hours, Mr. Norton." She turned on her heel and marched back to her white SUV parked in my driveway, yes, my driveway, and drove off without another word. Tom shook his head. "She has been getting worse lately. Ever since her husband left, she has been on a power trip with this HOA thing." "I did not know her husband left," I said. "Yeah, about 6 months ago. Just packed up and moved to Arizona. Cannot say I blame him, honestly." Tom looked up at my lights again. "Seriously, though, they look good. Do not let her bully you into changing them." "I am not planning to," I said. If she wants a fight over Christmas lights, she is going to get one. Tom grinned. That is the spirit. Let me know if you need backup at the next board meeting. I went back inside, my coffee now cold, and pulled up the HOA bylaws on my laptop. I had a digital copy saved from when I first bought the house. I searched for every mention of holiday decorations, exterior lighting, and seasonal displays. Nothing, absolutely nothing, specified color requirements for Christmas lights. The only requirements were that decorations could not be put up before December 1st, had to be taken down by January 15th, could not create excessive noise, and could not be illuminated past 11 at night on weekdays or midnight on weekends. My lights met every single one of those requirements. I had put them up on December 2nd. They were on a timer set to turn off at 10:30 every night. They made no noise because they were just lights. And tasteful was subjective, but I would put my simple string lights against anyone's gaudy decorations any day. I spent the rest of that day working from home, trying to focus on the software development project I had due by the end of the week, but my mind kept drifting back to Karen's threats. $250. That was not a small amount, and if she could find me for this, what else could she come up with? I had heard horror stories about HOAs before I moved here, but Willow Creek Estates had seemed reasonable. The fees were not too high, they maintained the common areas well, and the restrictions had seemed minimal. But that was before I met Karen Daniels. That evening I got a knock on my door. It was my next-door neighbor, Julie Simmons, a kindergarten teacher in her early 30s who lived alone with her 2 cats. We had chatted a few times over the fence but never really hung out. "Hey, Yates," she said, looking a bit nervous. "I heard about what happened with Karen this morning." "Tom told me." "News travels fast," I said, "in this neighborhood, always." She glanced at my lights. "For what it is worth, I think they are beautiful, very elegant." "Thanks, I appreciate that." Julie hesitated, then said, "I got a letter today from the HOA. Apparently my wreath is too large and needs to be replaced with something no bigger than 24 inches in diameter." "You are kidding." I wish I was. She showed me the letter on her phone. It was official HOA letterhead with Karen's signature at the bottom. "My wreath is 30 inches. I bought it at that craft fair downtown last weekend. It cost me $80. Let me guess, the bylaws do not actually specify wreath size," I said. "Nope, I checked. Just says decorations should be proportional to the house and not obstruct walkways. My wreath is on my front door." "It is not obstructing anything." I felt my anger rising again. This was not just about my lights anymore. Karen was going after multiple people now, making up rules as she went along. "We should go to the board meeting," I said. "When is the next one?" "Next Tuesday at 7. At the community center." "Let us both go, and let us bring copies of the bylaws." Julie nodded. "I will be there." Over the next 2 days I heard from 3 more neighbors. Mike Chen, who had received a notice about his lawn decorations being cluttered, even though he just had a simple nativity scene and a light-up reindeer. Patricia Evans, who was told her window candles were the wrong color. They needed to be white, not cream. And old Mr. Garrison, who apparently committed the grave sin of having a Santa on his chimney that was holding a fishing rod instead of a traditional sack of toys. Every single complaint came from Karen. Every single complaint was based on rules that did not actually exist in the official HOA bylaws. On Saturday morning, my doorbell rang at 8. I was still in my pajama pants and a t-shirt, having slept in after a late night finishing my work project. When I opened the door, I found Tom standing there with a massive grin on his face. "You need to see this," he said. "See what?" "Just come outside." I grabbed a jacket and followed him into the street. He pointed down the block and my jaw dropped. Mike Chen's house, which was 5 doors down, was covered in blue and white lights. Not just a few strands, but his entire house, his bushes, his trees, everything. He put those up last night, Tom said. After midnight. Worked until 4 in the morning with his wife. Why? I asked, though I was starting to suspect. He said if Karen is going to make up rules and go after people for no reason, then we might as well actually give her something to complain about. Plus, he said your lights inspired him. They look good. I did not know what to say. I walked down to Mike's house and knocked on his door. He answered looking exhausted but happy. Yates, good morning, he said. Like the new look. Mike, you did not have to do this, I said. I wanted to. Karen's letter about my nativity scene being cluttered was the last straw. I have been putting up the same decorations for 8 years. Never had a problem until now. So I figured if she wants to see something worth complaining about, here it is. His wife, Susan, appeared behind him, and they look beautiful. We should have done blue and white years ago. So much more peaceful than red and green. We also made copies of the bylaws, Mike said. Every section about decorations. We are going to the board meeting on Tuesday, and we are going to make sure everyone knows Karen is making things up. I felt something shift in my chest. It was not just me anymore. The neighborhood was pushing back. By Sunday afternoon, 2 more houses had blue and white lights. Patricia Evans and Julie Simmons both put them up, and they had clearly coordinated because their houses were across the street from each other, and the lights created this beautiful symmetrical effect. I was in my garage organizing some boxes when Tom came over again. You have started a revolution, he said. I did not start anything, I replied. I just put up lights I liked. Yeah, but you stood up to Karen. That is what people needed to see, that she is not as powerful as she pretends to be. She can still fine us, I pointed out. Let her try. You know what I found out? She cannot actually issue fines without a board vote. The HOA board has 5 members. Karen is president, but she needs at least 2 other votes to approve any fine. And I happen to know that David Morrison, who is the treasurer, is getting really tired of her nonsense. How do you know that? Because David is my poker buddy. We play every Thursday night. He told me last week that Karen has been trying to push through all these new restrictions without board approval. She has been sending out letters like she has unilateral authority, but she does not. Everything has to go through a vote. This was good information, very good information. So if we show up at the board meeting with proof that none of these rules exist, I said, and that Karen has been operating outside her authority. Exactly. We could get her removed as president. Would that not require a vote too? Sure would. But if enough homeowners show up demanding it, the board would have to listen. I spent the rest of Sunday drafting a document. I went through every single complaint Karen had issued over the past week, cross-referenced them with the actual bylaws, and highlighted every discrepancy. I made 20 copies, figuring that would be enough for everyone who might show up at the board meeting. Monday morning, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Mr. Norton, a woman's voice said, speaking. This is Margaret Howell. I live over on Maple Court, about 2 blocks from you. I heard about what is happening with the Christmas lights. News really does travel fast, I muttered. Small neighborhood, she said. Listen, I am on the HOA board. I am the secretary. Karen has not been telling the rest of us about these letters she has been sending out. I just found out about them yesterday when my neighbor showed me the one she got about her wreath. So you did not know she was doing this? No clue. And when I asked her about it, she said she was just doing preliminary warnings before bringing issues to the board. But that is not how it works. Any official complaint has to be documented and reviewed by at least 3 board members before we can issue a notice. So all her letters are basically meaningless, legally. Yes, they are not official HOA actions. They are just Karen being Karen. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Will you be at the board meeting on Tuesday? I will be running it, actually. Karen seems to think she runs the meetings, but as president, she just presides over discussions. I handle the agenda and the minutes, and I am making sure this issue gets proper time. Thank you, Margaret. Seriously. Do not thank me yet. Just make sure you and your neighbors come prepared. Bring documentation. Be professional. The more organized you are, the better case you will have. Tuesday came faster than I expected. I left work early to go home and change into something more presentable than my usual jeans and hoodie. I put on slacks and a button-down shirt, printed out extra copies of my documentation, and drove to the community center. The parking lot was packed. I mean absolutely packed. There were cars parked on the street because the lot was full. When I walked inside, the meeting room was standing room only. I recognized at least 30 people from the neighborhood, maybe more. Tom found me in the crowd. Holy hell, Yates. I think half the neighborhood showed up. Is this normal? Not even close. Usually we get maybe 10 people at these things. This is unprecedented. Karen was at the front table with 4 other people who I assumed were the rest of the board. She looked pale and was whispering urgently to a man on her left. Margaret Howell, who I recognized from her profile picture on the neighborhood Facebook group, sat at the end with a laptop open in front of her. At 7 sharp, Margaret called the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. We have a packed agenda tonight, but first, I want to address the elephant in the room. We have received multiple complaints about Christmas decoration notices that were sent out last week. I want to clarify that those notices were not officially approved by the board and do not represent the HOA's stance on holiday decorations. Karen's face went bright red. Margaret, I was handling those issues before escalating them to the full board. That is within my authority as president. Actually, Karen, it is not, Margaret said, her voice calm but firm. According to our bylaws, which I have pulled up here, any notice of violation must be approved by at least 3 board members before being issued to a homeowner. Did you get approval from anyone else before sending those letters? Karen stammered. Well, I was going to bring them to the next meeting, but I wanted to give people advance notice. That is not how it works, said the man next to Margaret. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with gray hair and glasses. I am David Morrison, the treasurer, for those who do not know me. Karen, you have been sending out notices without board approval for weeks now. This is not the first time. We let the earlier ones slide because they were minor issues, but this has gotten out of hand. I am trying to maintain the standards of this community, Karen said, her voice rising. If we let people do whatever they want, property values will drop, and this neighborhood will turn into a mess. Property values, I said from the crowd, my voice carrying across the room. Everyone turned to look at me. Is that what this is about? Margaret gestured for me to come forward. Mr. Norton, would you like to address the board? I made my way to the front, my documentation in hand. My name is Yates Norton. I live on Willow Creek Drive. Last week, Karen came to my house and told me my Christmas lights were in violation of HOA rules because they were blue and white instead of red and green. She said I had 48 hours to change them, or I would be fined $250. I handed copies of my documentation to each board member. I have gone through every single section of the HOA bylaws that relates to decorations, lighting, and seasonal displays. There is no mention of color requirements for Christmas lights. None. The only requirements are about timing, noise, and light pollution, all of which my lights meet. Karen grabbed the document. The spirit of the rules clearly indicates traditional decorations. The spirit is not enforceable, I said. And even if it was, blue and white are traditional Christmas colors. But that is not even the point. The point is that you made up a rule and tried to enforce it with threats of fines that you had no authority to issue. A woman in the crowd stood up. It was Julie Simmons. I received a notice about my wreath size. I checked the bylaws. There is no wreath size requirement. Mike Chen stood next. I got one about my lawn decorations being cluttered. The bylaws say nothing about how many decorations you can have, only that they should not block walkways. One by one, people stood up and shared their stories. Patricia with her window candles, Mr. Garrison with his fishing Santa. A woman named Lisa who got complained at because her Christmas tree in her front window was too tall. A man named Robert who was told his outdoor lights were too bright, even though he had them on the same timer I did, and they were the same wattage. Margaret was typing furiously on her laptop, documenting everything. David Morrison looked angrier with each story. The other two board members, a younger woman named Sarah and a middle-aged man named Paul, both looked shocked. Karen tried to interrupt several times, but Margaret shut her down. Karen, you will have a chance to respond when everyone is finished. After about 20 minutes of testimonies, Margaret looked at Karen. Do you have anything to say? Karen stood up, her hands shaking slightly. I have been president of this HOA for 3 years. I have worked tirelessly to keep this neighborhood beautiful and maintain our property values. Yes, maybe I was a bit overzealous with some of these notices, but my heart was in the right place. I was trying to prevent problems before they started. By making up rules, David asked. Karen, you know better than this. You cannot just invent restrictions because you personally do not like something. I was not making up rules, Karen insisted. I was interpreting existing rules to fit modern situations. That is the board's job, Margaret said, not yours alone. And frankly, based on what I am hearing tonight, I think we need to vote on whether you should continue as president. The room erupted in murmurs. Karen looked like she had been slapped. You cannot do that. Actually, we can, Sarah, the younger board member, said. Section 7 of the HOA bylaws states that any board member can be removed by a majority vote of the board if they are found to be acting outside their authority or against the best interests of the community. Paul nodded. I think we have heard enough evidence tonight to warrant that vote. I would like to make a motion, David said. I move that Karen Daniels be removed as president of the Willow Creek Estates HOA, effective immediately, due to repeated actions taken without board approval and abuse of her position. I second that motion, Margaret said. They took the vote. It was 4-1. Karen was the only vote against. She sat down heavily in her chair, her face pale. The motion passes, Margaret said. Karen, you are no longer president. You will remain on the board as a regular member unless you choose to resign. Karen gathered her things without a word and walked out of the room. The crowd was silent for a moment, then someone started clapping. Soon, everyone was applauding. Margaret held up her hand for quiet. All right, everyone, let us move on. We need to vote on a new president. I nominate David Morrison. I second, Sarah said. David was elected unanimously. His first act as president was to make an official statement that all of Karen's unauthorized notices were null and void, and that no fines would be issued for any of the decoration complaints. Furthermore, David said, I move that we officially amend the bylaws to clarify that color restrictions do not exist for holiday lighting, and that homeowners are free to choose their own decoration styles as long as they meet the existing timing and safety requirements. The motion passed unanimously. The board even voted to extend that to 4 board members present, which made it official. As people filed out of the meeting, I was stopped by at least a dozen neighbors thanking me for standing up to Karen. Tom clapped me on the back. "You did it, man. You actually did it." "We all did it," I said. "If everyone had not shown up tonight, nothing would have changed." Julie gave me a hug. "I am keeping my blue and white lights up all season." "Me too," Mike said, "and I am adding more this weekend." I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in days. My blue and white lights were glowing softly against the darkness, and I smiled as I pulled into my driveway. But the story was not over, not by a long shot. The next morning, I woke up to find 3 more houses on my street had put up blue and white lights overnight, then 2 more by evening. By Friday, which was December 13th, over 20 houses in Willow Creek Estates had blue and white Christmas lights. It became a thing. People posted pictures on the neighborhood Facebook group with the hashtag Willow Creek Blue and White. Local families started driving through our neighborhood to see the lights. It was not coordinated, there was no plan, but it happened organically. People were not just copying me anymore, they were making it their own. Some combined blue and white with their red and green. Others went full winter wonderland with blue, white, and silver decorations. The local news caught wind of it. On December 18th, a reporter from KCRG TV 9 in Cedar Rapids came to the neighborhood to do a story. They interviewed me, Tom, Mike, and several others. The segment aired that night, and suddenly we were famous. "Iowa neighborhoods' blue Christmas lights go viral after HOA dispute," was the headline. The video got picked up by national news outlets. Good Morning America called. So did CNN. I did a phone interview with a producer from the Today Show. It was surreal, but with the attention came problems. Karen was not taking her removal well. She started showing up at board meetings and filing formal complaints, proper ones this time, about every tiny violation she could find. Someone's trash can was out past 7 on trash day. Someone else had a lawn that was a 1/4 inch too long. Most of these complaints were dismissed as petty, but she was relentless. Then, in early January, things got weird. Houses in the neighborhood started receiving anonymous letters. Not from the HOA, these had no return address and were handwritten. They said things like, "Your lights are ruining our neighborhood," and "Take down the blue and white lights or face consequences." I got one on January 4th. It was in my mailbox when I got home from work. The handwriting was shaky, like someone had tried to disguise it, but the tone was unmistakably Karen. I called Tom. "Did you get one of these letters?" "Yep, yesterday. So did Mike and Julie. We think it is Karen, but we cannot prove it." "Should we go to the police?" "For what?" "A strongly worded letter. They will not do anything unless she actually threatens violence." But then she did. On January 8th, someone slashed the tires on Mike Chen's truck, all 4 of them. He called the police, and they filed a report, but there were no security cameras on his street, so there was no evidence of who did it. 2 days later, someone spray painted "Take them down" on Patricia Evans's driveway. The police were called again. This time, they took it more seriously because it was property damage. I installed a security camera on my front porch. So did several other neighbors. We were not taking chances anymore. On January 12th, my camera caught something. At 2:15 in the morning, a figure dressed in dark clothing walked up to my front yard and pulled out several of my blue and white light strands. The person yanked hard enough to break the clips holding them to my house and threw them on the lawn. Then they spray painted "Obey the rules" on my front door, I watched the footage 3 times. The person was wearing a hood and kept their face down, but I recognized the white SUV parked down the street. It was Karen's. I called the police immediately. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. I showed them the footage. One of the officers, a woman named Officer Martinez, watched it carefully. "You know who this is?" she asked. "I am pretty sure it is Karen Daniels. She lives about 4 blocks from here. That looks like her SUV, and she has been the only person who has had a problem with these lights. Has she threatened you before?" I explained the whole situation, the HOA complaints, the board meeting, her removal as president, the anonymous letters, the escalating vandalism in the neighborhood. "We need to talk to her," Officer Martinez said. "Can you give me her address?" I looked it up on my phone and gave it to them. They left, and I spent the next 2 hours cleaning spray paint off my door and picking up broken light strands from my yard. The officers came back around 6 that morning. Officer Martinez looked grim. We spoke with Miss Daniels. She denied everything, said she was home asleep and that anyone could have borrowed her SUV. "Did you ask to see her SUV?" "We did. It was in her garage. Clean, no signs of recent use, but that does not mean much. She could have cleaned it." "So what now?" "We are going to check with your neighbors, see if anyone else has footage from last night. If we can place her vehicle at the scene at the time of the vandalism, we will have enough to charge her." It turned out Julie Simmons had a doorbell camera that caught Karen's SUV driving past her house at 2:13 that morning. The timestamp matched my footage. Tom's daughter, who was visiting, had been up late with her newborn and had seen a white SUV driving slowly through the neighborhood around that time. She gave a statement to the police. On January 14th, the police arrested Karen Daniels for criminal mischief and trespassing. They also connected her to the vandalism at Mike's house and Patricia's driveway through matching paint from her garage. I found out later that, when the police searched her home, they found a notebook full of detailed notes about every house in the neighborhood that had blue and white lights. Dates, times, descriptions of the decorations, even personal information about the homeowners. It was obsessive. Karen was charged with multiple counts of criminal mischief, trespassing, and harassment. She pleaded not guilty at first, but when the prosecutor showed her all the evidence, the security footage, the witness statements, the notebook, she changed her plea. In March, she was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest, 2 years of probation, community service, and was ordered to pay restitution to everyone whose property she had damaged. She also had to resign from the HOA board completely. The neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. David Morrison turned out to be an excellent HOA president. He streamlined the rules, made everything transparent, and actually listened to homeowner concerns. Margaret stayed on as secretary and helped implement an online portal where people could submit questions and complaints directly to the board instead of going through one person. As for the blue and white lights, they became a Willow Creek Estates tradition. That next December, almost half the neighborhood put them up. Some people still preferred red and green, and that was fine. Some did multicolor. Some did all white. The point was that everyone got to choose. The local news did a follow-up story in December of the following year. They interviewed me again, and I told them the whole saga. The reporter asked if I regretted putting up blue and white lights in the first place. "Not even a little bit," I said. "Sometimes standing up for something small leads to something bigger. This was never really about Christmas lights. It was about not letting someone abuse power just because they could." Tom hosted a neighborhood party that December. Nearly everyone came. We had hot chocolate and cookies and walked through the streets looking at everyone's lights. Kids ran around with glow sticks. Adults chatted and laughed. It felt like a real community for the first time since I had moved there. Julie came up to me at one point. "You know what is funny? I moved here because I wanted a quiet neighborhood with no drama. Then you showed up and caused a whole revolution." "I did not cause anything," I protested. "I just put up lights." "Yeah, but you did not back down, that matters." Mike joined us with a beer in hand. To Yates Norton, neighborhood rebel and Christmas light pioneer. We all laughed, but there was truth in it. I had not set out to be any kind of rebel. I just wanted to put up lights that I liked on my own house. But when someone tried to tell me I could not, when they tried to use fake authority and fear to control me, I pushed back. And it turned out I was not the only one who was tired of being pushed around. The best part came in February when I got an email from David Morrison. The HOA had finished the year with a surplus in the budget thanks to lower legal fees and better management. They were issuing rebates to all the homeowners. It was not a lot, about $150 each, but it was something. David wrote in the email that it was proof that when an HOA operates efficiently and fairly, everyone benefits. I used my rebate to buy better lights for the next Christmas season. Karen Daniels moved out of Willow Creek Estates in April, right after her house arrest ended. I heard she relocated to a condo in Des Moines. I hope she found peace there, away from HOA boards and power trips. Despite everything, I did not hate her. I felt sorry for her. She had let her need for control consume her to the point where she threw away her position, her reputation, and her freedom over Christmas lights. Life went back to normal after that. I kept working, kept improving my house, made more friends in the neighborhood. Tom and I started having weekly dinners. Julie and I dated for a few months, but decided we were better as friends, which was fine. Mike and Susan had me over for barbecues in the summer. The next December rolled around, and when I climbed up on my ladder to put up my blue and white lights, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Not just because they looked good, though they did, but because they represented something. They represented the right to make choices about your own property. They represented standing up to bullies. They represented community solidarity. As I was finishing up, attaching the last strand to the gutter, Tom came out of his house. "Need any help? I am almost done, but thanks. You going with blue and white again, of course. It is tradition now." He laughed. Who would have thought? Yates Norton, tradition setter. Weird how life works out sometimes. Hey, speaking of which, I talked to David yesterday. He said the HOA is thinking about putting together a neighborhood committee to plan events. You know, block parties, movie nights in the park, that kind of thing. He asked if you would be interested in helping. Me, I am not exactly the social committee type. No, but you are the type who gets things done, and people listen to you. Think about it. I did think about it. And eventually I said yes. Because I realized that being part of a community means more than just living in the same place. It means contributing, participating, and sometimes leading when necessary. The blue and white lights stayed up through mid-January, as per the HOA rules. When I took them down, I stored them carefully in labeled bins in my garage. I already knew I would be putting them up again next year. In March, we had our first neighborhood committee meeting. 12 people showed up. We planned a spring picnic, a summer concert series, and a Halloween costume contest. The HOA funded some of it, and we did fundraisers for the rest. It was work, but it was good work. The spring picnic in May drew over 100 people. We had grills set up in the neighborhood park, tables full of food, kids playing soccer and tag. David Morrison gave a short speech thanking everyone for making Willow Creek Estates such a great place to live. He mentioned the light controversy from the previous year and said it had been a turning point for the community. Sometimes conflict brings people together, he said. "It forces us to talk to each other, to figure out what we really care about. And what we care about is having a neighborhood where people feel at home, where they can be themselves, and where everyone looks out for each other. That is what Willow Creek Estates is now, and that is what it is going to stay." People clapped. I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the May sunshine. That summer, I did something I had been thinking about for a while. I invited my parents to come visit from Wisconsin. They had not seen my house since I first bought it, and I wanted to show them around the neighborhood. My mom loved Cedar Rapids. She said it reminded her of the small town where she grew up. "You have made a real home here," she said as we sat on my back deck one evening. "I am proud of you, Yates." "Thanks, Mom. Your father told me about the Christmas light thing. He read about it online." "Of course he did. He said you stood up to some busybody on the HOA. That sounds like you. You never did like being told what to do for no good reason." I laughed. "Is that a compliment?" "It is an observation, but yes, it is a compliment. The world needs more people who are willing to question authority when it is wrong." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the cicadas and watching the sun set. I thought about how much had changed in the past year and a half. How a simple decision to put up blue and white Christmas lights had led to all of this. That fall, the neighborhood committee organized a Halloween haunted house in the community center. It was a massive hit. Over 200 kids came through. We raised enough money to fund new playground equipment for the neighborhood park, and then it was December again. Time for Christmas lights. I put up my blue and white lights on the first Saturday of the month. By the second weekend, over 30 houses had followed suit. Some were full blue and white displays like mine. Others incorporated blue and white into their traditional setups. A few people got creative and did blue and white icicle lights that looked absolutely stunning. A family who had just moved in 2 doors down from me, the Parkers, came over to ask where I had bought my lights. "We want to join the tradition," Mrs. Parker said. "Our kids have been asking about it since we moved in. They saw the news story from last year online." I directed them to the store and helped them plan their display. It felt good to welcome new people and share the story. On December 20th, the neighborhood committee organized a holiday lights tour. We had maps printed up showing all the houses with displays, and we encouraged people to walk or drive through. Local businesses donated hot chocolate and cookies that we gave out at the community center. The event was so successful that people from other parts of Cedar Rapids came to see our lights. The local news came back again. Same reporter as before. She interviewed me, Tom, David, and several others. The story aired on Christmas Eve, and this time it was not about HOA drama. It was about how a community had come together to create something beautiful. I watched the segment at Tom's house. He was hosting a Christmas Eve party and about 20 neighbors were there. When my interview came on, everyone cheered. "Look at you, Yates," Julie said. "Local celebrity." "I am not a celebrity," I protested. "You kind of are," Mike said. "Own it." That night, after the party wound down, I walked home alone. The streets were quiet, the blue and white lights glowing softly against the snow that had fallen earlier that day. It was peaceful, exactly what I had wanted when I first put up these lights 2 years ago. I thought about Karen and wondered if she was watching the news wherever she was. I hoped she had found some peace, that she had learned from what happened. But mostly, I just felt grateful that things had worked out the way they had. Christmas morning, I woke up to a text from my mom. "Just saw the news story. You looked great. Merry Christmas, sweetheart." I texted back, "Merry Christmas, Mom." I spent the day at Tom's with a bunch of neighbors who did not have family nearby. We cooked together, played board games, watched Christmas movies. It was one of the best Christmases I could remember. In January, the lights came down again. Life returned to its normal rhythm. Work, friends, neighborhood committee meetings, the occasional HOA board meeting that was now actually pleasant and productive. In February, I got a message on Facebook from someone I did not know. Her name was Amanda, and she lived in a neighborhood in Minneapolis. She wrote that she had seen the news story about Willow Creek Estates and was having her own HOA issues. She asked for advice. I spent an hour writing back to her, explaining what we had done, how we had organized, how we had documented everything and stood together. I told her that the key was unity, that HOAs only have as much power as homeowners give them. She wrote back a week later to say that she had followed my advice, gathered her neighbors, and confronted their HOA board. Things were changing over the next few months. I got similar messages from people all over the country. Each one was dealing with overzealous HOAs, and each one wanted to know how we had fought back successfully. I answered every message. It became a sort of side project. Tom joked that I should start a consulting business. Yates Norton, HOA Whisperer. That is a terrible business name, I said. Maybe, but you would make a killing. I did not start a consulting business, but I did create a website. Nothing fancy, just a simple page with information about HOA bylaws, homeowner rights, and how to organize against unfair restrictions. I included our story from Willow Creek Estates as a case study. The website got thousands of views in the first month. December came around again. Year 3 of the blue and white lights. By now, it was so ingrained in the neighborhood culture that nobody even questioned it. It was just what we did. Over 40 houses participated that year. The neighborhood committee organized another lights tour, bigger than the previous year. We had sponsors from local businesses. We sold maps for charity. We raised over $5,000 for the Cedar Rapids Food Bank. David Morrison announced at the December board meeting that Willow Creek Estates had been featured in a national magazine as an example of a well-run HOA. The article talked about our transparent policies, our community engagement, and yes, our Christmas light tradition. We have come a long way, David said, and it started with one person who was willing to stand up for what was right. So thank you, Yates. Everyone in the room looked at me. I felt my face flush. It was not just me, it was all of us. True, David said, but you started it. After the meeting, Margaret came up to me. You know, I never liked Karen. She was always so controlling, so rigid. But in a weird way, I am glad she went after your lights. It forced us to confront problems we had been ignoring. It made us better. That is a generous way to look at it, I said. Sometimes the best things come from challenging situations. As I drove home that night, I thought about how true that was. I had not wanted conflict. I had just wanted to put up Christmas lights. But the conflict had led to positive change, not just for me, but for the entire neighborhood. The years that followed were good ones. I got promoted at work. I started dating someone I met through the neighborhood committee, a woman named Rachel who had moved to Willow Creek Estates in the spring. We took things slow, but it felt right. The blue and white lights became famous. We were featured on travel blogs and in holiday decoration magazines. People came from all over Iowa and neighboring states to see our neighborhood during Christmas. Local businesses benefited from the increased traffic. The HOA used the publicity to attract new homeowners, and property values actually increased, ironically enough. Karen would have loved that, I thought. Property values going up. That is what she had claimed to want all along. She just went about it in the worst possible way. I never heard from Karen directly, but I did hear through the grapevine that she was doing okay. She had gotten a job at a library in Des Moines and was living quietly. Someone said she had gone to therapy and was working on her control issues. I hoped that was true. 5 years after the original conflict, I was invited to speak at a national HOA conference in Chicago. They wanted me to talk about community engagement and conflict resolution. I almost said no because public speaking was not my thing, but Tom convinced me to do it. "You have a story people need to hear," he said, "and you tell it well." So I went. I stood in front of 200 HOA board members and homeowners and told them about the blue and white lights. I told them about Karen's overreach, about the neighborhood coming together, about the importance of following actual rules instead of made-up ones. I told them about how conflict, when handled correctly, can strengthen a community. The response was overwhelming. People came up to me afterward with their own stories, asking for advice, thanking me for speaking out. I gave them my website information and encouraged them to document everything and stand together. On the flight home, I thought about how surreal my life had become. All because of Christmas lights. When I got back to Cedar Rapids, Rachel picked me up from the airport. "How was the conference?" she asked. "Weird. Good, but weird. I am not used to people treating me like some kind of expert." "You are an expert. You have been through it and you have helped a lot of people." "I guess." We drove through Willow Creek Estates on the way to my house even though it was not the direct route. It was June, so there were no Christmas lights, but the neighborhood looked beautiful anyway. Well-maintained lawns, kids playing outside, neighbors chatting over fences. It looked like a community. "You really did change this place," Rachel said. "I just put up lights." "You did a lot more than that, Yates. You stood up when it would have been easier to give in. That matters." I supposed it did. That December, year 6 of the tradition, we had our biggest lights display yet. Over 50 houses participated. The Neighborhood Lights Tour had become an official Cedar Rapids event, listed on the city's tourism website. We raised $10,000 for charity. I stood in my front yard on Christmas Eve, looking at my blue and white lights, and felt a deep sense of contentment. This was home. This was community. This was what happened when people refused to be bullied and chose to stand together instead. Tom came over with a bottle of wine. "Merry Christmas, you troublemaker." "Merry Christmas, Tom." We sat on my porch, bundled up against the cold, and watched the occasional car drive slowly past to look at the lights. "You ever regret it?" Tom asked. "All the drama, the conflict, Karen going to jail." "Karen did not go to jail. She got house arrest." "You know what I mean." I thought about it. "No, I do not regret it. I wish it had not escalated the way it did. I wish Karen had not snapped. But the end result, this neighborhood, this community, I cannot regret that. Me neither." We sat in comfortable silence, sipping wine and watching the lights twinkle. Inside my house, Rachel was making cookies. I could smell them through the window. Life was good. The next morning, I woke up to find a small package on my doorstep. No return address, just my name written in careful handwriting. I brought it inside and opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note and a small ornament shaped like a snowflake. The note said, "I am sorry for everything. You were right and I was wrong. Thank you for not giving up. KD." I held the ornament up to the light. It was blue and white, of course. I showed it to Rachel when she woke up. "What do you think?" "I think people can change," she said, "and I think she is trying to make amends." Should I respond? "That is up to you." I thought about it for a few days. Eventually, I decided to send a simple response through the Facebook profile I found that appeared to be her. "Thank you for the ornament. I hope you are doing well. Yates." She responded a few hours later. "I am. Better every day. You should know that watching what I did to myself and others was a wake-up call. I am getting help. I am learning. Thank you for accepting my apology." We did not become friends, but there was closure. That felt important. As the years continued to pass, the blue and white lights remained a Willow Creek Estates tradition. The story became part of the neighborhood lore, told to new residents as they moved in. The HOA remained well-run and transparent. The community stayed strong. I married Rachel 3 years after we started dating. We had the wedding in the neighborhood park. Half of Willow Creek Estates showed up. Tom was my best man. David Morrison officiated. He had gotten ordained online for the occasion. We bought a bigger house a few blocks away, still in the neighborhood. We put up blue and white lights every Christmas, of course. Our kids, when they came along, grew up thinking it was normal for entire neighborhoods to coordinate their Christmas decorations. Looking back, I could trace so much of my life to that moment when I decided not to back down to Karen Daniels. Not because I was trying to be a hero or make a statement, but simply because I believed I was right and she was wrong. Sometimes that is all it takes. One person willing to stand up. One person willing to say, "No, this is not okay." One person willing to endure conflict for the sake of what is right. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, that one person inspires others to stand up too. Then you are not alone anymore. Then you are a community, a real one, built on mutual respect and shared values. That is what Willow Creek Estates became. That is what my blue and white Christmas lights represented. Not just pretty decorations, but a reminder that ordinary people have power when they choose to use it, that communities are stronger than petty tyrants, and that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can lead to the most meaningful changes. Every December, when I plug in those lights, I remember. I remember the morning Karen showed up in my yard. I remember the board meeting where we stood together. I remember the security footage and the arrest and the difficult conversations. But most of all, I remember the neighborhood coming together, house by house, light by light, until we created something beautiful. And that really is the whole point. Not winning against the HOA, though we did that. Not becoming famous, though that happened too. The point was creating a community where people felt safe to be themselves, where rules were fair and enforced fairly, and where a simple choice like what color Christmas lights to put up was respected as the personal decision it should be. That is what I fought for. That is what we all fought for. And I would do it again in a heartbeat.